Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
No matter how hard Gob tried, he couldn't complete his rounds by 9 o'clock. He was in the middle of the process when an unidentified herald shouted down the hallway to gather in the conference room for a meeting. Immediately, there was the sound of slamming doors. Everything in the department came to life. Gob glanced disapprovingly at his watch, and Amanda, the young nurse, looked faithfully into the doctor's eyes. "Gob, maybe the most important thing won't keep you waiting too long. I don't think you have to do rounds every day. You could do them every other day." This sweet girl had started working in their department just a few months ago, right out of medical school. She tried to please everyone, but she didn't always succeed. The senior staff was critical of her flattery and didn't approve of the young woman's behavior. Dr. Job was also annoyed by the girl's rash suggestions, and he quickly put her in her place. "Amanda, keep your personal opinions to yourself and focus on your direct duties. This is a medical facility, not a club." Amanda was reprimanded in the men's ward and immediately blushed with excitement, her hands trembling as she registered the history, illness, and increased hesitation. Gob immediately regretted offending a nurse who was respected by her patients, though, but it was too late to back down. He left the room and quickly walked to the elevator, where a line of medical workers had already formed. Smiles shone on the faces of people in white coats, and the main topic of conversation while waiting for the underground transport was the approaching professional holiday. The head nurse of their department joined the waiting group. "Hello everyone, I have good news for everyone. From reliable sources I was told that today there will be an award ceremony." This news especially pleased the women. But among the men, someone noticed that they will receive only a pittance. It would be better to use the money to renew the fleet of cars. These old cars are impossible to drive at speed, and the signs are afraid that there will be a breakdown or an accident at the exit. Who would then be blamed? The doctors themselves, of course. Gob recognized the chief mechanic in the complainer. The head nurse, on the other hand, didn't even give him a glance. She waved the electrician away. "Tim, are you used to complaining about everything? You're not even right about this, and they have to haul more out of the garage to do it. Then there wouldn't be a problem." That was quickly forgotten. What were the conditions in the old hospital? It was a fair point, and one that was hard to argue against. Even the chief mechanic stared at the mosaic floor, and only his heavy breathing indicated disagreement with the head nurse's opinion. The New York District Hospital, where Gob had moved a little over 2 years ago, was highly regarded in the region. For a small provincial town of 20,000 people, this state-of-the-art medical complex, built as part of a pilot project, was a luxury. But since considerable money had been spent on its construction, the demands on this medical facility were much higher than on other regional units. The hospital staff, at least most of them, were conscientious in their duties. Only Chief Medical Officer Eric, or Eric as he was also known, fully realized the importance of his mission. After all, he had been in charge of the old hospital for almost 16 years and was hoping to take a similar position in the new complex so as not to disrupt his personal plans. As a responsible leader and a good organizer, Eric was tirelessly concerned about the reputation of the institution entrusted to him. And to motivate his team, Eric used a simple but effective method: 5-minute meetings. The last meeting, held on the eve of Medical Workers' Day, began with a pompous introduction by the chief physician. "Dear colleagues, on the eve of our professional holiday, I must inform you that we have a huge responsibility for the health of current and future generations." Eric was unremarkable in appearance and short in stature. But God had endowed this ambitious man with eloquent oratory skills. He had an intuitive sense of where to emphasize and where to stop. He did not deviate from these rules this time. After a short but impressive introduction, Eric paused and looked around the room. The audience reacted to this message with a meager applause. Eric continued with even more enthusiasm. "Friends, dear colleagues, citizens trust us with the most valuable thing, their health, and our main task is to justify this trust, and we have everything we need to achieve this goal. After all, we are lucky to work in this wonderful complex, where there is modern equipment and comfortable conditions for our patients." A light murmur of whispers passed through the hall of those who could not contain their emotions. Michael, who had struggled to find a suitable seat before the meeting began, and then sat down next to Gob, whispered softly, half jokingly, "You don't understand, Gob. Without regular meetings, our hospital will collapse, a flood will break out." The intonation and the expression on his face made Gob smile, forgetting his caution. He said rather loudly, "You're good, Michael. You should get actors from all sides. They'd be surprised." He playfully picked up on the idea. "Gob, I'll definitely consider your offer when I get kicked out of here." Those seated nearby reacted to this version of the young surgeon with sax, and Eric sent an angry blare from high above the podium right into the epicenter of the fun. Unfortunately, not everyone sitting in the audience realizes the importance of the moment. Some are having a good time, and I want to say that we do not keep those who treat their work as a craft that allows you to earn a piece of bread in these walls. The chief doctor did not even suspect that with this statement he awakened the dormant talents of popular humor. Some medical workers, neglecting the importance of the moment, went from worrying to communicating in raised tones and began to offer various culinary delights instead of a piece of bread. Bread is good with crust and butter. Once in a while you can indulge in oysters, but a slice of bread is better than tuna in white truffle sauce. You can also add something stronger. Someone in the front row took the bait, and so it began. Frogs, tea, and lobster fries were spread throughout the room. Fisherman's gusto gripped the audience, and the chief physician, in a vain attempt to regain the attention of the team, fussed. "Friends and colleagues, we cannot treat the common cause. We still have a report for the half year, and then a concert of amateur art, which our cultural workers have specially prepared for the holiday." Perhaps the last argument brought the audience to its senses, and the hall calmed down a little. But the chief doctor decided not to ignore the blatant facts of disciplinary violations, which almost disrupted his speech. "On this pre-holiday day, I notice with deep sadness that among us there are still people who confuse the minds of other people." Rolled his eyes. Where is ours to confuse the minds of people? That's an amazing turn of phrase. I never would have thought to put those two words together. A connoisseur from the back row whispered. If it came to such creative phrases, then our chief has exhausted himself. Now he will read out the list of the best employees, hand out awards to the deputies, and he won't forget about himself. In other words, it's business as usual. People could have been spared. Job supported the authors of this statement. And when a break was announced after the ceremonial part, they were the first to rush to the exit, to the head of the personnel department, to the guards sitting at the table by the door. She had received orders from above to detain those who refused to be part of the team, as physical methods were completely ruled out. The woman shouted for everyone to stay in the audience. Anyone who left the concert would not be rewarded. The crowd swept back. Only the young surgeon stepped confidently around the staff, who shouted after them, "Do you have a special invitation, or don't you need the money?" Job turned around. "Don't yell, this isn't a fair. My patients are waiting for me," he followed, muttering. "God, I'm so annoyed with this bureaucracy." "Time marches on and the bureaucratic guard only grows stronger," said Michael, imitating the head of HR. "If you don't stay for the concert, we'll strip you of your awards. For God's sake, eat, don't get in the way." And God laughed heartily. "Thank you, coworker. That's the first positive vibe I've had all day. You certainly have a hidden talent. And I'm truly sorry to see it go to waste." The men said goodbye at the elevator, not forgetting to seal the emerging alliance with a firm handshake. A few minutes later, Gob was completely immersed in the whirlwind of everyday life. He forgot about the 5-minute break and the upcoming professional holiday. But in the evening, when he could hardly move his legs from fatigue, he met Michael again in the Falcon on the first floor. Michael was talking to an elderly stranger and was very happy to see Gob. "Gob, although I am not a fatalist, I'm sure that our second meeting in one day is no coincidence. After a busy day, I wanted to relax a little and Gob was the first to offer to do so." "I think so too. And that's why, Michael, we need to distress right away. It's against all the laws for two objects to get close twice in a short period of time." Laughed. "Yeah, we actually haven't left this point for days, so I don't see anything surprising. You know, I'd often catch myself thinking that the operating room is a sort of space capsule. Surgeons often don't leave that confined space for 24 hours at a time. I like your concept. It's very fresh and in the spirit of the times." Michael winked slyly. "Shall we sit down somewhere then? How's your schedule? Or is your wife against mail company?" remarked Gob ironically. I have no wife or any other onerous obligations, so I gladly accept your offer, especially since a professional holiday is coming up. Then I invite you, Gob, to my favorite little restaurant. It's modest, but the food is excellent. I'm at your complete disposal. Let's use the first name. On the way to the romantically named Blues, the men found a common topic of conversation. However, they did not discuss the current situation in the hospital, but recalled their alma mater and carefree student years. In his 30-odd years, Gob has repeatedly found himself in situations where the interlocutor abused his attention, but his father would tell him, "Son, a smart man can always listen to a fool." Michael did not fit that definition, although from the first minute they met, Gob flooded him with a variety of information. Gob had to be polite, or nod his head occasionally for a change. But there was a nice moment of communication, talking meaningfully and clearly. "Gob, you have no idea you've entered a veritable serpentarium. From the outside, our hospital looks like a model medical facility. But in reality, there's so much going on here, it's unbelievable." To keep the conversation going, Gob weakly said, "It is not only in the district hospitals. After the institute, I worked for almost 10 years, first in the diagnostic center, then in the regional surgical department. And believe me, there too they are ready to betray or devour their neighbors." Poured some wine into the glasses. "You were lucky, and I immediately found myself in this den of cockroaches. I decided on my profession at school, and my mother worked in the city administration. She did her best to make her little son happy. In other words, thanks to her diligence and connections, I received a target direction and entered the budget. I admit that at that time I was wildly happy and did not even suspect that this shiny metal has a reverse side, made of cast iron. In short, I realized that I had fallen into a trap. Except that when it came to distribution, I had to go back to the village and practice medicine there. I had other plans for my life." Gob hurried to reassure his comrades. "You shouldn't say that. New York Hospital is a great place to practice," interrupted his interlocutor. "It's tolerable now. But 8 years ago it was a horror and worse. This was the situation in rural medical facilities. In the end, my mother got me a voucher through a village official. I didn't know your life was gone. That's not the word. When I arrived at the polyclinic, I was almost knocked off my feet. This building housed several departments and a clinic. There was a catastrophic shortage of beds for critically ill patients. Complex operations had to be performed practically in the field. For the first 2 years, I could not recover at all. You won't believe it, but I wanted to run away anywhere, even to the North Pole, just to avoid going to work." A shadow of unpleasant memories passed over the young man's face. But in a second, Michael was smiling. "Maybe I would have run away someday too, if it hadn't been for love. They write about such cases in novels. Remember how in the poem he suddenly jumped up, lost his balance for a second, but quickly regained stability and gracefully spread his arms to the sides. And every evening at the appointed hour, a maiden's moan moves through his veins, picked up by the fog moving in the window." The surgeon's short speech attracted the attention of the diners. Michael, as befits an artist, with a bow, received a storm of applause. Gob once again admired the acting abilities of his colleague. He really wanted to tell Michael that he was clearly mistaken in the choice of profession, but the second paragraph of the father's code of conduct forced him to keep silent. It said that not everything that comes into your head can be said out loud. And Gob also applauded the self-taught medical doctor. "Bravo, Michael. Did you capture the mood that the great poet intended? It was obvious flattery, but he took the complimentary gesture for granted. You may exaggerate my abilities, but it was a pleasure." He refilled the glasses again. "Excuse me, but a traditional toast to the ladies is appropriate at this time." The man bought a glass. Gob followed suit. "Can I ask you an indiscreet question?" "Go ahead," suddenly burst into laughter. Gosh, we're so steeped in convention. We've agreed not to be officious, but we still get into it. In short, Gob, feel free to ask your question, and I'll answer as honestly as I can." Gob agreed. "I still don't understand how you ended up in New York. Frankly, I'm intrigued by your story. Everything is shrouded in mystery." The smile disappeared from his lips. "Man, no mystery. All the outrages were my mommy's doing. One day she came and saw the conditions her son had to work in, and she pulled me out of the pit. And some stranger from Michael's poem kept wielding a knife and fork, because after a colorful performance and a glass of wine, he had a vicious appetite. I'm telling you, it was like a novel. First they met, then a few months of passionate love. But then it turned out that each of them drew a picture to himself, which has nothing to do with reality. To make a long story short, we went our separate ways without making any claims against each other. I have no sentimentality, although you hit the mark because this story did end sadly. My date left in an unknown direction. I think she even got married, and then he rolled his eyes toward the ceiling, and Gob asked worriedly, "Did something unpleasant happen to her?" You could say that. My first love left this life young and beautiful. A current of electric shock ran through Gob's body. This reaction did not escape Michael's gaze. Was there anything like that in your life? Michael's question was asked without any sign of sympathy. On the contrary, there was some satisfaction in his voice. He didn't want to continue the conversation. Gob was in a hurry to get home, so he said the first thing that came into his head. "Excuse me, I have a meeting with my parents soon. They always call me on Fridays." Michael was disappointed. It's always like this when you find a common ground with someone. Circumstances intervene. "I don't want to keep you, so to speak, as an excuse for running away," Gob said, embarrassed. "We'll have time to talk." "Sure, you go ahead and I'll stay a little longer, and then I'll go home to my wife and children too." I didn't grieve alone for long. Soon after the failed affair, I got married. I am now a respectable family man and father of 2 children. Julia, my daughter, will start first grade in the fall. From Michael's tone, it was easy to guess that he cherishes his family. Gob left the restaurant, feeling a burning envy. The thoughts in his head were racing and interfering with his dreams, preventing him from focusing on one thing at a time. The condition was so unpleasant that Gob said in a half-whisper, "You need some fresh air. It will help your nervous system recover." Too many impressions in one day. And in college, Gob often resorted to this proven method of exercise, recommended it to him. The evening coolness pleasantly enveloped the body at a leisurely pace. Gob walked along the city's main street, watching passers-by. Not far from the city park, he noticed a girl of about 11 years old and absent-mindedly looked at his watch. He wondered what a child was doing alone at such a late hour. But before Gob could think about the irresponsibility of the girl's parents, a young woman ran up to her and started talking animatedly. The girl nodded her head, and her 2 pigtails bounced amusingly. It seemed to Gob that the mother was scolding her daughter for some transgression. Soon both women were heading in the opposite direction from him. The man gave them a long, melancholy look. He could have had a daughter about the same age. If only. He didn't want to think about the tragedy that had ruined his life so many years ago. The girl stayed in his mind for a while, though he never got a good look at her. But he did notice her mother snatching the basket of flowers from her daughter's hands. Immersed in his thoughts, Gob walked toward the house where he had found temporary shelter. But there he was met with a deafening silence. The man even shuddered from an unpleasant sensation that reminded him of a close encounter with Medusa. It had happened in a distant childhood when Gob, as his mother affectionately called him, had not yet gone to school. His parents decided to improve his health before starting a busy school life. The trip to Vegas exhausted the boys, and his father decided to go straight to the sea. Job was difficult, but the head of the family was adamant. The boys sat in the water, and all sorrows went away. But the first swim brought not only disappointment, but also horror. Gob did not have time to move away from the shore, as something sticky and disgusting touched his feet. He screamed and ran down the bank. The others were no less frightened than the boy. His father ran after him. "They're just bits of wood, Gob. Look how pretty they are on your hand," he said. Stranger John stood neat, but life works in such a way that some are lucky and some are unlucky. One of his father's life mottos came back to mind. "Gob, never try to jump over yourself. It's like jumping from one pole to another. You have to be content with what you've been given." But a smart man can stretch even a very meager supply over several days, while a fool can use up his entire supply at once. As a child, Gob didn't understand his father's aphorisms. Only in his teens did he realize their hidden meaning. And as Gob grew older, he noticed one peculiarity. In a difficult moment, his memory always told him what he needed. And on that summer evening, when he sat staring stupidly at the TV, it was his father's voice that reminded him that he needed to change something in his life. Relatives and close friends often laughed at John with him. "Ja, you're a strange man. You try to plan your life down to the last detail, not forgetting that there is such a thing as the unexpected. When it happens, no amount of planning will help. John confidently defended his main principle in life: there must be order in everything. He demolished the theories of his opponents with one phrase: a serious man will not be taken by surprise and will not wait, because he is ready for such moments. My life didn't go smoothly right away either. There were times when setbacks knocked me out, but I took them to heart and tried not to repeat mistakes in the future. That's why my son has been accustomed to this routine since childhood. John has lived a difficult life. His mother was widowed early on and raising 3 boys alone. John was the eldest in the family, so he had a lot of responsibility. He started earning money from the age of 14. During summer vacations, he did not hang out on the beach, but unloaded cars at the station. John also tried himself in a fast food restaurant, or he got a job as an assistant cook. After school, his neighbor, out of pity, got him a job at a car service, from where he left to serve in the army. After the service, he had a dream of studying to be a paramedic, but he had to help his mother bring up his younger brothers. To be closer to this cherished dream, John got a job as a driver at the ambulance station. There he met his fate in the person of Elsa, a young graduate of the regional medical school. Between the young paramedic and the driver, immediately a special relationship arose. At first it was just sympathy, which grew into a strong friendship. Often after the shift, the young men spent time together. They often helped each other in solving life problems, but their relationship never went beyond friendship. One day Elsa didn't show up for work, and John got worried. He began to ask about the reason for her absence, but no one knew anything. He had to go to the head nurse. She looked at him over her glasses and said mockingly that he, John, had not taken care of his partner. At that moment it seemed to him that the floor beneath him disappeared. What had happened to Elsa? Something terrible had happened to her. The head nurse realized that she had gone a little overboard with the riddles and rushed to reassure the valued employee John. "Don't worry, she's in no danger. She just broke her leg. She was doing home repairs and fell from a height. In other words, it's a domestic injury." The young man breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh, Elsa, you're so reckless, always getting into trouble. How many times have I told you to be careful, but you're always so reckless?" The head nurse remarked. "Oh, you don't talk, you act. A real man is the one who came, saw and took it to the registry office. We have been watching you for a long time. We are already looking forward to your wedding. We're so excited to have a party." John's face turned red, and he hurriedly left the head nurse's office. That day he could not wait until the end of his shift, and after work he hurried home to his girlfriend, not forgetting to take a bouquet of flowers on the way. The girl was happy to see him. "John, I knew you'd come. It's so boring sitting home alone, especially on crutches." The girl smiled and asked, "John, are flowers a sign of respect? Or has John never acted impulsively?" And then some excitement awoke in him, and he muttered, "Elsa, I love you. Will you stop going around in circles?" "Yes, in circles. The whole substation is watching us, and we're acting like teenagers. Maybe it's time we made a decision." The girl answered John very calmly, as if she had been expecting this conversation for a long time. "Of course, the time is not quite right, but I'm glad that you found the strength to say these words to me. I thought I'd never hear them, that you'd be circling me for another 5 years. The boy was shocked. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Unfortunately, it's a man's prerogative to make the first confession. So we, poor and unfortunate, have to wait for you to mature." After the wedding, the locals became known as the family team. To the small team was added Leslie, a graduate of the same school where Elsa studied. In such a composition, the team worked for almost 15 years, and then Leslie transferred to the infectious disease department. In rare moments of rest, the friends liked to talk about life. The instigator of such conversations was always John. "Leslie, you have a daughter growing up, and we have a son. I've often wondered about your Nancy's future." Leslie's answers were always evasive. Only once did she confess. "I think it's a pointless endeavor. Of course, like any mother, I want my child to do well, but let him or her choose his or her own path." Since this confession went against John's own principles, he began to talk Leslie down. "You can't do that. A person at such a young age is not capable of calculating everything. I know from experience that at 17 years old, the world seems rosy. Therefore, the task of parents is to help the child to avoid mistakes." Elsa interrupted her husband. "What are you doing with your rules in someone else's monastery?" Leslie imagined he convinced himself that our God should become a doctor. This desire had already taken on idea-fixed proportions. The man wouldn't give up. But I'm not imposing my understanding on our son. I'm just trying to steer him in the right direction, and I don't see anything wrong with that. After all, I wanted to devote my life to medicine. I wanted to save people. In my opinion, that goal has been achieved. Do you save people's lives every day with us? No, Elsa. It's not exactly what I dreamed of. I'm just a driver, not a doctor. You haven't gotten where you want to be either. That's why we instill in our son that he must improve our results. Leslie listened and marveled. John, you are certainly right about something. I wonder how your son perceives this, to put it mildly, mentoring. Elsa answered for her husband. Gob is obsessed with medicine. He has already thoroughly studied human anatomy in the library, borrowed books. In short, preparing for admission. Gob began to really move towards his main life goal since the 9th grade. He attended optional classes in biology, participated in subject Olympiads. In his certificate, he had only 2 4s, so he entered medical school at the first attempt. Well-learned rules of his father's school did not allow him to relax. Classmates openly laughed at him. Job had never encountered such things. Try to taste life for once and enjoy it. Only once Gob deviated from his principles and decided to get divorced. It happened on New Year's Eve. For almost a week, the guys had fun in the country house of the parents of one of the students. Of course, there were strong drinks and girls. But after the holidays, Gob felt bad for more than a week. Even years later, he was ashamed to remember that party and its consequences. The result of the fun was a hangover and problems in the dean's office. But the most amazing thing is that his father found out about his exploits and personally came to the university. John was not shy in expressions and publicly lectured his son. Did you do that? Do you want to be expelled from the university? My mom and I put so much effort into your education. You become a man and you're fooling around. If it happens again, I don't care if you're an adult. I will spank you. To emphasize his point, John began to pull the belt over his pants. Gob was startled. What? Don't make a fool of me. The man grabbed his arm. You voluntarily became an object of ridicule. The fame of your adventures has reached our town. I've told you everything. Now think. The father was very disappointed in his son and immediately went to the train station. Job wanted to see him off, but John grumbled. I don't need an escort. I can get around on my own. The man headed for the exit, but suddenly turned around. He looked into his son's eyes, as if he wanted to see into his soul. Gob, you have no idea how upset your mom is. There are already rumors about you in the city. I will not repeat them, but acquaintances point the finger at her. Pity her. And in general, before you do anything, think about your loved ones. Unfortunately, we rarely think about how our actions can hurt our loved ones. Father left, and his last words echoed in Gob's head for a long time. At night, he dreamed of his father, and through his sleep, Dr. Job thought that he should call his parents in the morning. It was his last conscious thought before he drifted into a restless sleep involving the chief medical officer, the doctor, and a strange girl he met near the park. Holidays in the lives of professionals bring pleasant changes for a short time. Most often they pass without consequences. It is interesting that medical workers attach the least importance to such dates. Medical Workers' Day and the fiery speech of the chief physician were forgotten in a week. However, the pleasant moment, despite the threats of the head of the personnel department, remained. All employees received a bonus, including those who showed their indiscipline. However, the monetary reward was issued only after the holiday before lunch. Sarah, the head nurse of the general surgery department, burst into the resident's room. Hurry up to accounting. That's where the bonuses are given out. Gob was surprised. What bonuses? The head nurse sadly noted that there was no money in the account, despite the promise. It just came in today. Why not on the card? Can't we please Dr. Gob? If they give you cash, that's the way it should be. What kind of people are these people? You give them a favor and they turn their noses up at it. For Sarah, rank and position didn't exist. She could argue with the head of the department and the head doctor. Gob looked at Nani, who, without raising her eyes, sang over the medical records of her patients at a neighboring table. Are you okay, Nani? The woman answered without looking up from her work. Not like you, Gob. I have to finish. I dove into the paperwork, looking for the duty roster. I'll get my bonus later today. But a spoonful is good for lunch. After that, it's no fun. I don't agree with you. because it's always nice to get paid. For many people, payday becomes a real holiday. Nanny looked at the young doctor with surprise. "God, I'll never believe that you belong to that category of people. You're so responsible." And God realized that Nani, who was temporarily acting head of the department, had misunderstood his words. He laughed heartily. "Did you really think I had time for this?" "Oh no, I'm not interested, and I don't have any bad habits. You could say I'm the perfect candidate for a husband, and you, my colleague, you're not modest. But I'm not exactly your fiancé. 20 years ago." A dreamy smile froze on the charming woman's face, and God couldn't help but admire her. But Nanny quickly brought him back to earth. "God, hurry up and get your bonus. It won't take long." A familiar figure stood at the elevator, and God, "You're almost there. Did you find your life partner so quickly?" "Nani, if I had, you have no idea how happy I'd be. But instead of a handsome stranger, I met a friend on the way to the accounting office, and we decided to meet at this great little restaurant. I recommend it, by the way. The place has a romantic name, Blues, and the food is excellent." The head nurse looked suspiciously at the surgeon. "You're just being reasonable. I know these social gatherings. My husband drinks brine or kefir after these events. I tell him it's time to calm down. And he says, 'Nani, you don't understand male company.' Nani, your husband is right, because in such companies people become closer. And in general," the head nurse hopelessly waved her hand. "This male solidarity. Don't forget that tomorrow you're on duty. And as a friendly word of advice, I want to tell you not to trust people you don't know too well." Gob could barely contain his laughter. "Nani, you sound like my mother. When I was young, she tried to protect me from dangerous acquaintances. Woman was not embarrassed, thinking that at the moment I was protecting not only the department leadership, but also your mother. So I want to warn you that is not who he says he is. People call such people dark horse." Gob had unwittingly blabbed. "But Nanny, don't interrupt me, young man. I know what you're thinking, but I'm not a quarrelsome person. And I don't believe in gossip. I have personal experience with this man, and I can honestly tell you that he's not very pleasant. I mean, from my experience. I won't go into details, but I'll tell you one thing. Michael is one of those people who puts his personal interests first. He'll betray you at any moment, and he's not a very good professional." "But then why did they keep him in office?" Nanny grinned. "Michael has a powerful patron. You are still new and do not know that the urology department was open only to introduce one managerial position. Which, by the way, is why we're always short on beds. But at some point, it'll all become clear. Eric will leave, and this masquerade will be over." Gob respected Nani and didn't doubt the accuracy of her words. After that conversation, he thought seriously about it. But he didn't want to cancel his meeting with Michael. "I'll try to figure out who this person is. I've never been wrong about people. Could I be wrong this time?" That question took time to answer, and Gob decided to take his time. At precisely 5 o'clock, he left the department, as there were no familiar figures at the main entrance. Gob decided to wait. In a small park located not far from the hospital, the friends were slightly caught in the rain, so they had to use an umbrella. To his surprise, the man discovered that he was not alone here. On a park bench sat a girl, and next to her stood a basket of flowers. Gob approached the young flower seller and immediately recognized her as the same girl he had seen in the city park a week ago. "Hello, girl." The girl looked at him warily. "Hello. Why are you sitting here in this weather? You're out here all by yourself." "I'm just sitting here, that's all." It wasn't hard to guess from the girl's tone that she didn't like being questioned by a stranger. She hid her frightened eyes from him, then turned away, pretending she had no interest in him. Gob took a seat on the wet bench. "Say, if it's no secret, who are those flowers for?" The girl looked at him intently. "No one, just for myself. People come to the hospital to visit someone, and some of them need flowers. So do you give flowers or sell them?" The girl got angry. "I'm still little, and little ones can't sell things." Gob said as friendly as possible. "Okay, let's break the rules a little. Give me the flowers and I'll give you money for ice cream. You can consider it my treat." The man selected 5 lush daisies from the bouquet and handed the girl a few coins. She immediately smiled. "Thank you, mister. If you like daisies, I can bring them to you here." Although Gob was completely indifferent to flowers, he said, "All right, bring them. Just tell me, where's your mom?" I don't have a mom. I live with Wanda. She's my aunt, but she's like my mom. And her aunt lets you sell flowers. Two blue eyes barely glanced at Gob's face. What are you saying? Wanda doesn't know. She sells them herself when she's home. But right now Auntie's at work. She's working 2 jobs because we need a lot of money, and you want to help her. The girl lowered her head but answered nothing. Michael appeared on the path. Gob, there you are. I've been looking for you. First I waited by the elevator. Then the girls at the information desk said you'd already left and that you were here alone. Do you think you're home? Gob thought to himself. Was Michael in a better mood? That's great, things are getting better. But out loud, he said, actually, you're wrong. I was just talking to a very nice person. Gob, I had nothing to do with the little girl's disappearance. Just don't think anything bad about me. I'm not a villain. Michael's attitude was very positive. Then Gob asked, are you kidding? That's a bit side. Your situation has been safely resolved. Put his arm around his shoulders. Not exactly, but there's hope. By the way, you can help me with something. Gob answered nothing or remembered the head nurse's warning. The two of them walked silently into the restaurant and took the same table they had sat at a week ago. Gob remarked with significance. It seems to me, Michael, that we're forming a good tradition. If my wife finds out I'm spending money aimlessly, she'll destroy me with one word. The man laughed, but in a forced way. Gob pretended not to notice. At this hour, there were no visitors in the restaurant, so the waiter quickly brought the order and wished the guests a pleasant appetite. The men had already refused the drinks, but asked him to bring a few drops just in case. Gob, crossing his arms on his chest, said, I won't. I have an 8 a.m. shift tomorrow morning, and you know very well that weekends are always busy with patients, broken and with a sharp stomach. That's for sure. Honestly, I don't like those shifts. You're always waiting for some catch that could ruin all your prospects. Gob raised his eyebrows in surprise. I've never thought on that scale. My parents both worked in medicine for almost 40 years. They kept telling me that the most important thing is to save a person's life, and it doesn't matter if that person is an official or a bum living in a dumpster. You're an altruist, Gob. That's commendable. But I have a different mindset, which is why I'm always thinking ahead. That is, I interpret every event or fact from multiple perspectives. If I understood you correctly, personal affairs are very important to you. Not more, but important. And I don't see anything wrong with that. Just like last time, Gob lost his appetite. Michael, you promised to tell me about the difficulties in your department. Michael's face froze for a moment in a grimace of displeasure, but he immediately put on a duty smile. Yes, of course you have. That's the reason we decided to have another meeting. By the way, we're back to an official tone. Gob let the remark pass by his ears. Mimicking his friend, he changed the subject. How long have you been head of the department? Michael's face turned into a living mask again. Not that long. At first I was just an intern, but that was at the old hospital. And when the new one opened, they decided to dedicate beds to urology, and I was assigned to that position. And now someone's decided to change everything. I told you this place was a mess. Everyone's trying to eat whoever's more successful. I'm being set up all the time. Today they announced that they're planning to close the department. The reason is, they can't just shut down an entire department. They have to want to. There's always an excuse. Eric said we have bad statistics. We're not meeting our bed days. It's not a big deal. This isn't a medical facility. Gob waited to let off some steam. A couple minutes. Michael puffed indignantly, then suddenly looked at both of them dismissively. Looks like something like this is being planned. We're going to be merged with general surgery, that is, your department. Obviously, the question of leadership will come into sharp focus. Gob was worried, and Michael said with undisguised irritation, Gob, why are you playing games? You all realize that you have to choose between Nani and me, and a lot depends on you. Gob had never seen such blatant insolence in his life. He even lost speech for a moment from confusion. So you want me to endorse your candidacy? Of course I do. We're friends. What's Nani's background? She may be a good surgeon, but she's old-fashioned. It's not in the spirit of the times. I don't think someone like that should be in a management position. Michael, don't you have any faults? Gob asked snidely, but he didn't pay attention. He was excited. Professionally, of course I have no flaws. I'm an experienced doctor. I've performed major surgeries myself, and I've been recognized in this field many times. Besides, I'm not thinking about retirement yet." He wanted to add something else, but he looked at Gob and stopped talking. Gob realized that his interlocutor was waiting for his answer. He decided not to mislead Michael and spoke frankly. "Michael, I can't promise you anything right now, because I hate backstabbing, first of all. And secondly, I disagree with you about age. I've always believed that a senior position should be filled by an experienced specialist with a solid work record. The authority of the candidate plays an important role, and Nanny is well respected in this department." "Gob, don't jump to conclusions." The new appearance of the waiter silenced Michael. He hurriedly grabbed the bill. "I'll pay it. It was my idea," Job said firmly. "I'm used to paying for dinner myself." He counted out the correct amount and held it out to the waiter. As he walked toward the exit, he felt Michael's unfriendly gaze on his back. With regret, Gob thought about how deceptive appearances can be. Sometimes a person looks so pleasant and simple, but behind it lurked such intentions. Dr. Gob spent the evening in front of the television again, and on Saturday morning, before his shift, he decided to call his father. "Father, I need your advice." I'm sure his father's voice had an immediate calming effect on him. Thoughts lined up in a united front. Confidence appeared in his son. The conversation was short because John didn't like to talk too much. But after this socializing session, Job felt a little calmer. Dr. Job liked to walk, although most of his colleagues came to work by private vehicle. He wouldn't change his habit. It was a 20-minute leisurely walk to the hospital, so he went out early to have some free time. After yesterday's rain, there was a freshness in the air. The sun was diligently doing its job. The man didn't expect to meet the little flower girl again this Saturday morning, but the little flower girl was sitting on the same bench, and he saw two women in hospital gowns walking away from her. The doctor greeted the girl cheerfully. "Hello, I didn't expect to see you here." The girl was surprised. "But I promised to come yesterday, and promises must be kept." "Good girl. What's your name?" "I don't know your name yet, but I've known you for 2 days. I'm Emma. And I know you. You're Dr. Gob." Gob was surprised. "Who told you my secret?" Emma nodded toward the women. "These ladies said our Gob was coming in, so there would be rounds. Do you see all your patients every day?" "Every day," the girl asked sympathetically. "It must be hard. Even worse than going to school." "You guessed it, but that's life. Everyone has to fulfill their duties. I'm a doctor, and my duty is to cure people." "Do you cure everyone?" "I try, but I don't always succeed, unfortunately." The girl looked at him with pain. "They didn't save my mom either. I don't know how it happened. Aunt Wanda won't tell me anything. And she's right. There are some things that little children are better off not knowing," the girl said dreamily. "I can't wait to grow up." "Take your time, girl." "Okay, it's time to go." He turned to go, but was stopped by the girl's exclamation. "I picked a bigger one for you on purpose. Wanda says my mom loved daisies too. I even have a picture of her in the field of daisies. She's so beautiful." Suddenly a sharp pain pierced the man's heart. He quickly picked up the bouquet of wildflowers and handed the girl a few bills. "Thank you for the flowers. Go buy yourself some candy. Will you come tomorrow?" he asked as he walked. "No, I can't make it tomorrow." Gob took his shift, but a vague sense of unease lingered all day. Contrary to his expectations, however, there were few incoming patients and mostly not in his specialty. So he was able to think things over in the silence of the ward. In all his time at the hospital, Gob had never encountered such a confusing situation. Somehow the secret games and the appearance of this girl had come together, a combination that alarmed him because he didn't understand its meaning. He wondered why this strange girl had appeared now. After all, New York is a small city, and I should have met her earlier. By the end of the day, the man suddenly came to the conclusion that there was something about this girl that reminded him subtly of his dead fiancée. For years he had been actively pushing the memories of that tragedy out of his head, and to this day he had succeeded. After graduating from college, Gob did not have to look for his first job. Even in his final year, during his internship, he had made a good name for himself at the diagnostic center. The older specialists admired him. "This guy is a real catch for us in terms of technical thinking and quick grasp of useful material." Job received similar feedback and showed even more enthusiasm. As a result, he received an excellent grade for the practicum and the institute sent a request to the dean's office and was surprised. "Gob, you are definitely making progress in my day. There's only been a couple of times when we've been sent an individual request. How would you like to work at the center?" Gob looked down modestly, as a student should. "In principle, I don't mind, although I prefer practical training." The dean smirked. "And what? In diagnostics, they deal with corpses. There are living people there. They come for examination. I want to operate, though it's tempting to work on modern equipment too. But you never know what you want. Let's make a decision." People, as usual, are waiting for an answer. Job turned to his father for advice. John said sternly, "Son, it's time for you to learn to make responsible decisions for yourself. What does your intuition tell you that you should settle for? The diagnostic center is the most appropriate place to start your internship. And I don't want to let people down. It's a great team." Well, there you go. You've answered the big question. Gob had been at the center for just over 3 years. He could operate sophisticated equipment with his eyes closed and accurately decipher images. The department began to talk about Gob's brilliant career. It was a period of growth, and it was during this time that he began an affair with Caroline. A girl with such a rare name worked in a cafe located on the first floor of the center. She stood behind the counter and, like a fairground buffoon, offered visitors various dishes. Later, he noticed that the girl was clearly flirting with him. He too started flirting with her. Several months passed in this mode, and one day the girl asked, "Doctor, are you always like this?" Gob pretended not to understand the question. "What do you mean?" "Well, it's like you're out of this world. The girl is trying, paying attention to you, and you don't react. Not even interested." Gob laughed. "It's not hard to guess that the girl's suffering from my neglect, is you?" "Yeah, well, I don't, because I'm fun by nature. My friends say I can bring the dead back to life." Though the joke wasn't very good, considering where it was told. Gob smiled. "I wouldn't mind testing your abilities. How late do you work, until what time?" "6. Good. I'll meet you out front." At first, Gob had no intention of getting serious with this poor girl. Caroline was clearly not his type. Her way of speaking sometimes puzzled the guy. Of course, he was not against female company, but always limited himself to casual liaisons, since his plans for the near future did not include marriage. But fate decided to play a joke on him, and he himself did not notice how Caroline charmed him. Gob was drawn to this pretty provincial girl like a magnet. As much as possible on his modest salary, he gave the girl gifts, and she did not hesitate to tell him about her desires. The bouquet for a certain period lasted only 2 weeks, and then something happened that all lovers wait with excitement. One evening, after an evening stroll, Caroline said breathlessly, "Gob, today I am all alone. My neighbor will return only at 9:00. The young man immediately understood the hint and, like a real man, could not refuse the lady. "Then let's go to your place." It was an extraordinary night. Although Job had already had close relationships with girls and women, he had not yet experienced such amazing sensations. When it was time to part, he couldn't tear himself away from his beloved, and Gob whispered something. "I've never met a girl like you." "Gob, I've always dreamed of a guy like you too." After that night, he couldn't come to his senses for a long time. The thought pulsed somewhere near his temple. "Gob, I think you've fallen head over heels in love." At that moment, he didn't ask himself how or why Caroline had ended up in this town. He knew nothing about this girl at all. A little later, she confessed to him that right after graduation, she had an affair with a guy from their town, but he dumped her. Caroline told this touching story with tears in her eyes. "You know, Gob, I trusted him, and he just took advantage of my weakness. He was the reason I was still an underachiever." Gob was very surprised. "Did you suffer so much that you couldn't muster the strength to at least go to college?" Caroline, looking him straight in the eye, replied, "I wandered for 3 years as if in a fog. I did everything mechanically. My mother even took me to a psychotherapist in the region." "Don't you have a therapist at your hospital?" "Do you think there's a hospital in New York City that's too scary to go into, Gob?" "In a word, hopeless. Something like that. That's why you went to the big city, looking for a happy life." This question suddenly aroused the girl's aggression. "Why? Everyone thinks that if a girl from the provinces, she came for a rich daddy. But I have completely different plans. I don't like old people at all. And money isn't the most important thing to me." Then tell me what you value most in a man. The girl didn't hesitate to blurt it out for good measure. I knew it was you. As soon as I saw you for the first time in our dining room, I realized that you will not be satisfied with trifles. In principle, you're not wrong. My father raised me from childhood to believe that every woman, no matter her age or position, deserves respect. In short, I was brought up in a conservative spirit. Caroline looked at him with admiration. Gob liked both the girl's gaze and her delighted sighs. He drew her to him. Caroline had never offered that to anyone before. You first. Let's go to my parents' house this weekend. I want you to meet them. The girl suddenly pulled out of his embrace. I think you're rushing things. I'm nothing to you. How will you introduce me? Gob realized that Caroline was waiting for him to take a more serious step, which he could not yet decide to do. Only at the end of August, he was supposed to propose to the girl, when she timidly confided in him. Gob, I'm not sure yet, but maybe we'll do it soon. She looked at him expectantly, and he did not answer immediately. Then we have to get married right away. Caroline's lips curved into a smile. Wait, get married how? Wedding. Every girl dreams of that day. Favorite's eyes glittered suspiciously, and Job tried to reassure her. Can't you be upset? All right, I'll get a loan, and my parents will help too, and we'll have a real wedding. Caroline jumped for joy all evening. She thought of all sorts of ways to celebrate the wedding, and before she went to bed, she suddenly asked, Are we going on a honeymoon? Gob was not prepared for such a question and decided not to hesitate. I do not have such a high income to play a wedding and go on vacation, so I choose something in my opinion, the most optimal option. Just get married and then go to the south. My folks' favorite vacation spot is Vegas. Have you ever been there? Caroline was confused. Her gaze wandered. No, never. I prefer Turkey or, as a last resort, Miami. Gob thought for a moment. It seems that my beloved has an unhealthy appetite. But he did not voice this thought, but promised the girl. Okay, we'll figure something out together. First, we'll apply, and then we'll find a tour. I have a vacation in September. Carolina clapped her hands happily. Can you imagine? I have such a lucky coincidence too. For several days now, this phrase had been pulsating in the young doctor's mind. What kind of fortunate coincidence? Luck had accompanied the young couple through an acquaintance. Job at the last moment purchased 2 tickets to Vegas at a discount. For the first few days, Caroline sulked, expressing her displeasure. I thought that as a last resort we would go to Miami or Turkey. Vegas doesn't impress me personally, and we even have an acquaintance who works there as a cook. She says it's a mess. God was beginning to be annoyed by the constant dissatisfaction of his future wife, and he decided to tease the girl a little. Caroline, you should listen less to your girlfriends. Everyone has their own idea of the quality of service. Maybe someone accidentally offended your Vegas chef. That's what she's mad about. There was also the fact that the trip didn't coincide with the scheduled wedding date. It turned out that the young couple had to first go on vacation and then already formalize their relationship. But this circumstance did not embarrass Caroline in the slightest. It seems to me that this is a trifling matter. On the contrary, it is even intriguing. We will go with you, and the next day we will go to the registry office. The girl quickly agreed with the limited format of the celebration, especially since, as it turned out later, she had a very limited circle of relatives and acquaintances. However, there was one circumstance that bothered Job. The bride didn't want to introduce him to her family before the wedding. It seemed that she was just shy of her mother and sister. He had talked to her mother on the phone a couple of times, but it couldn't be called an introduction. The vacation was coming to an end when Caroline decided to ride a banana with the neighbors. Gob did not like such entertainment, and he immediately refused. You go, and I'll rest a little. Why am I so sleepy today? It seemed to him that Caroline was even glad of it. You're right, relax. I'll get some rest too. Soon married life will begin. You'll be in control of your every move. Go have fun. Just be careful not to do anything heroic, given your delicate state. The girl pressed her lips together. Gob, I'm expecting kisses. He kissed his bride soundly and plumped down on the bed. He hadn't been keeping track of time, so it was hard to tell how much time had passed since the group of young men had left, including Caroline. Gob was awakened by frantic shouting both in the street and in the hotel. But what exactly had stirred the crowd was unclear. Gob ran out onto the veranda and cheerfully asked the crowd what was wrong. A teenager standing below on the terrace explained briefly. The banana boat capsized. Everyone got out except one girl who can't swim. She swallowed some water and the lifeguards are pumping her out. Without waiting for the boy to finish, Gob rushed out. His thoughts were confused, stumbling and mingling with horrible images. A crowd of people had gathered on the beach, but he squeezed through. "Caroline, where's my fiancée?" He probably looked like a madman because people stepped aside as he approached. Caroline was lying on the sand and the rescuers were trying to resuscitate her. Job shoved one of them roughly. "I'm a doctor, let me through." The lifeguard looked at him sadly. "Old man, it's too late. We fought for 15 minutes, but it was all in vain." What happened next? Gob remembered vaguely. He clung to the girl's body and shook it. "Caroline, wake up. This wasn't supposed to happen." But a slight smile was forever frozen on the girl's lifeless face. To the body approached the mother of the deceased from New York, but she did not want to even talk to her future son-in-law, as she considered him guilty of the girl's death. Before leaving, the woman decided to speak her mind. "Don't you dare show up in our town. If you do, you will not be met with affection. Let them put me in jail. I don't care anymore." It wasn't until 3 months later that Job, through an acquaintance, received a copy of his fiancée's death certificate. But the medical document made no mention of Caroline's pregnancy. He became uncomfortable with the realization that his fiancée had deceived him before her tragic death, and this fact caused the young man incredible pain and agony. He could no longer work in the diagnostic center, and after a vacation immediately transferred to the regional hospital. The tragedy in his personal life affected the fate of the young surgeon. The first 2 years he avoided any relationship with girls, but gradually the pain dulled, and Job returned to normal life. This process was largely facilitated by John, his father. "Life goes on, and you shouldn't isolate yourself. Mom and I respect your feelings, but there are a lot of beautiful girls out there besides Carolyn. Do you want to have a family? Living alone is hard and joyless." Gob really wanted to change something in his life, but he couldn't help himself. When he accidentally learned through an acquaintance that a new hospital complex had opened in New York, he immediately thought, "This is your chance." He hurried to the regional health department to declare his desire to move to the provincial city. There, Dr. Job's initiative was appreciated. "Thank you for responding. We do not even know how to solve the problem of staff shortage. The hospital is large, but the staff is catastrophically lacking. So your application will likely be approved." The next day he got a call. "Gob, your application has been approved. When can you leave from New York?" "As soon as tomorrow. As soon as I get the settlement, I'll be on my way to New York." And then he was burned. The thought that his Caroline lived in that city. Up to that moment, the name of the city had only seemed familiar. In the new place, everything was unfamiliar. He was especially struck by the customs of the locals. Everyone here knew everything about everyone and could even list their relatives down to the 5th degree. The hospital itself had its own unusual rules. For example, friendly relations between doctors and junior medical staff were normal, and a cleaning lady could openly criticize a doctor. When Gob expressed an opinion about this over tea, Nanny warned him, "Gob, don't even try to change anything. They won't understand you here. You better pretend you don't notice." Gob thought about it and decided to heed her advice, so he gradually adapted to life in the new environment. After 2 years, he realized that the local customs no longer caused him such annoyance and irritation as in the early days. During this time, the chief physician also observed a surgeon from the New York area. All the visiting specialists were respected and respected by the locals, including A. The attitude toward them was quite different. When the order came from above to optimize the hospital, Eric and his 2 deputies brainstormed for several weeks. The chief physician suggested, "Guys, we need to find a way to get out of this situation with minimal losses. You realize that we can't afford to lose valuable personnel. Therefore, the most reasonable solution would be to merge the 2 departments. As for my personal opinion, I would remove the urology department. The bed occupancy rate in that department is appalling. We have to be content with seeing patients from other specialties. As a result, the overall performance of the hospital suffers." After much discussion, everyone unanimously agreed on this option. All that remained was to appoint the right head of the department. One of the deputies favored Nani, while another felt that Michael should take the job. "Friends, I think Michael is more suitable for the job. He is young and proactive. We need to create favorable conditions for people like him." The first deputy objected. "Initiative alone won't get you far. Nanny has experience, and that is the most important thing in our region. Pooh listened silently to the disputants when they tired of arguing their point of view. He said firmly, "But I think Gob is fully qualified for a management position. He has a good practice, having worked in a diagnostic center, then in regional surgery. Gob is a modern doctor, and today we need exactly such people. I think that in the future Gob may well take my place." It was an unexpected decision, because we exchanged glances. "What about Nani? She'll take over as head of the foreign ministry. That's the kind of assistant I can rely on." The chief doctor's decision meant that one of the deputies would go to the ward or clinic, but who exactly will become a freelancer, no one knew yet. Thus, solving the personnel issue in the district hospital led to the appearance of several enemies of Dr. Job, but Job didn't even realize it. Monday morning he came to work, and the head nurse informed him that his supervisor had called him in. Eric was on the phone with someone. He waved his hand, indicating for the doctor to take a seat at his desk. The supervisor next to him hung up the phone and without speech, which was uncharacteristic of him, said, "You may have heard that there is a disturbance in our hospital." "Yes, I heard something by the way. I don't have time to get into rumors." Eric bought it. And he shouldn't have. You always have to stay informed. Gob smiled. "All right, Eric, I'll make it up to you. But I don't think that's why you called me here." It was too early to beat the drums. "I may not be approved in the region, but you will be. I can imagine how he will tear his hair out." And Gob smiled. "Wanda, you're cruel, considering the peculiarity of Michael's hair." The girl jiggled. "Oh, that's hilarious. I've already pictured it." Gob also imagined how he would look for vegetation on a completely bald head, and his mood immediately improved. Back at the pulpit, he got right down to business with Nani. "I'll be honest with you, I don't see myself in a leadership role," Nani objected. "Gob, you're like a volcano now, panting with indignation, but there's no need to waste your nerves, because your appointment was expected. I'll tell you something else, I recommended you. He's not a bird of a feather, and he has too much ambition." There was no time to argue because his patients were waiting for it. By the end of the day, Gob was so busy that he'd forgotten about the appointment. His stomach was cramping with hunger, so he decided to stop for something to eat. The last thing you wanted to see was Michael, but he was the one waiting for him on the hospital porch. "What's up, Gob?" Celebrating the triumph. He didn't know what Michael was talking about at first. "If you're talking about the surgery, yes indeed, it did turn out surprisingly well. I'm always cautious about abdominal manipulation because you never know what you're going to see." During the autopsy, Michael rudely interrupted her colleague. "Don't lecture me. I'm talking about another surgery. Honestly, I didn't expect this from you. I thought you were the epitome of integrity." "Did you?" "I trusted you, and you promised to help me." Michael's voice was desperate. Gob realized it was about his assignment. "Oh my God, Michael, I had no idea. I was called on the carpet and told. Do we have to take orders? Don't look so desperate. Maybe my nomination won't get approved upstairs." Gob made a move toward Michael, but he stepped back. "Don't try to make excuses, Gob. I consider what you did to be a stab in the back." Suddenly, Michael turned abruptly and sprinted toward the parking lot. Gob looked sadly at him. "This is not good, but how could I have known?" Gob walked home along the familiar route and imagined the deafening silence that would greet him in his apartment. He wanted to howl with Lonnie because the beginning of his friendship with Michael had been destroyed in an instant. He spent the entire evening in front of the TV again, thinking, "Why am I so unlucky?" As if someone cursed me with bad luck, and the misfortune is just beginning to come together as His Majesty of Chance bursts in and everything collapses before my eyes. Will I have to live my whole life alone? He fell into a troubled sleep. Dr. Job remembered that he hadn't seen Emma's girlfriend in days. He regretted that he hadn't even tried to find out anything about the child. Summer was slowly coming to an end. The first fallen leaves appeared on the sidewalks, and the rain was a growing reminder of the imminent arrival of autumn. Gob had his own memories associated with this time of year when he moved to New York City. Every year on the last day of August, he visited his fiancée's grave. When he first came to the cemetery, he was afraid that Mother Caroline would fulfill her promise. But the guard who helped him find the place where the girl was buried spoke up. "We still remember the incident to this day. They say Caroline had a fiancé in town, and she died right in front of him, and he didn't help her. Or maybe the guy just didn't have time to prevent the trouble. How many cases like that had shocked Gob? But he said nothing to the counselor. He continued his sad story. I feel sorry for the mother. She was raising her daughter alone. Her husband died a month after the wedding. He fell asleep in the grass. And then a little scythe came out of nowhere. So Ariana was a widow all her life. Men were crazy about her. She was a beautiful soul, but she turned them all down. And then her younger sister, the mother, committed a crazy act, brought her little girl, and she herself disappeared in an unknown direction. Gob followed the guard and listened to this story, which shocked him, but Caroline did not say anything. Probably she was ashamed of such a past. They had all come. Here they were together, mother and daughter. The man pointed with his hand to two modest monuments. Gob studied the dates. He felt uneasy, barely audible. He asked why Caroline's mother had died because she had a heart condition. She needed surgery, but where'd get the money? Carolina went to the city to earn money and left her daughter with her mother. Wanda is not very well off. She earns a lot at the post office, but she did a good job with the monuments. You should be more modest. The guard spoke quickly, and Gob did not immediately understand the essence of his story when he mentioned a girl. He wanted to ask more, but the man was suddenly in a hurry. Okay, I don't have time to dance with you, sharpen up. We need to keep an eye on the subject. There are all sorts of people here, and then the object disappears. The guard walked quickly away from the family, down the path between the rows of graves. For the first time, Gob stayed in the cemetery until evening. He mentally talked to Caroline and heard her cheerful answers. After that visit to the place of grief, he felt better. Thereafter, as soon as something unpleasant happened, he would rush to the cemetery. And almost every time he found signs that the place was being visited by someone else. But usually such visits were not connected with a particular date. And only the last day of August had a symbolic meaning for him. After all, it was on that day that Caroline tragically died. To walk 3 kilometers from the city to the cemetery on foot was difficult, so Gob decided to go by car. He walked along a familiar path and noticed 2 figures from afar. At first, he wanted to turn back, but curiosity took over. The man quickened his step, and after a few seconds, he recognized the girl Emma, who had already come several times with flowers to the hospital square. With her was an unfamiliar young woman whose head was covered with a black shawl. Emma waved her arms excitedly and shouted loudly, "Dr. Gob, it's so good to see you." The woman looked at him suspiciously and scolded Emma. "You can't yell loudly in a cemetery." The girl snorted and muttered something to herself, but then she heard nothing more. The woman didn't have time to admonish her before she turned her attention to her acquaintance. "Aunt Wanda, remember I told you about him?" The girl nodded toward Gob. "And you didn't believe me that I was friends with a real doctor and scolded me for taking money from strangers." Gob decided it was time to intervene. "I apologize for barging in so abruptly. Unfortunately, I don't know your middle name." The woman looked him straight in the eye, and the look sent a shiver down Gob's spine. She guessed she had made a strong impression on the stranger. "Yes, Caroline and I aren't biological sisters, but we are very much alike. I'm 3 years older than her, but the age difference hasn't stopped us from being very close. At work they call me Wanda, but you can just call me Wanda." Gob couldn't take his eyes off the woman's face. It seemed to him that artists painted portraits of people like Wanda, and her perfect facial features and velvety skin with a peach tank gave her appearance a special sophistication. The man couldn't help himself. "They really do look alike." Wanda smiled bitterly. "Yes, only my younger sister didn't live to be my age. She was very desperate. She went through both fire and water. She used to tell me about you, but Mom didn't know anything." Gob sighed heavily. "Unfortunately, Caroline didn't tell me anything about her family. She was shy. She dreamed of a trouble-free life, but it didn't work out." Wanda looked at Emma. "Caroline probably didn't tell you anything about her daughter either." Emma looked at him and smiled, and then he realized what had first surprised him about the girl's appearance. Her eyes were exactly like her mother's, or rather the way she squinted. So Emma is Caroline's daughter. Then why didn't she tell me anything about her? Is it really so hard to understand? She was afraid of losing you. I remember the day before she left. She called me for advice. I told her to tell you the truth, but she said it was better to tell you about her daughter later. Emma was just over 2 years old at the time, and when Caroline had her accident, my mom told me to get custody, but they still wouldn't let me because of her heart condition. Wanda adjusted the flowers on her mother and sister's graves. That's all I told you about our troubles. Now it was just the two of us, Emma and me. We wanted a better memorial than these barely scraped together. But no one can help us, and we don't ask for help. Emma forgot her shyness. She decided that the person her aunt was talking to deserved her trust. She approached Gob and confidently placed her small palm in his large hand. "Doctor, you'll be my friend, won't you?" The man squatted down and looked into the girl's eyes. "I will. Just let's make a deal that you won't walk around the park with your basket anymore." Emma held up her hands. "But I haven't done that in a long time because Aunt Wanda scolded me a lot, and the daisies used to bloom too. Now we have to wait for summer." They walked together toward the road, and Gob finally plucked up the courage to ask the question that worried him most. "Emma's father. Who is he?" Wanda was silent for a long time, but then she whispered, "I'll tell you, but not now. I don't want to traumatize the baby." Gob felt uncomfortable. "Just don't think I'm being too nosy. I just want to be a normal father. Even if things didn't work out with his mother, he should still take care of his child. Unfortunately, that kind of father is rare." Emma was very unlucky in that regard. They reached his car and Gob offered them a ride to town, but Wanda refused. "Thanks, but we're close by. We practically don't live in the city. The village is just around the corner. There's an old lady there that we're helping. Right now it's just about harvesting potatoes. Yes, we have to get Emma ready for school." They walked hand in hand, and he looked after them and thought how much he wished he could make them happy. Maybe then he'd finally get a real taste of life. That encounter in the cemetery completely turned Dr. Jod's mind around. The two figures on the road turned into a persistent vision. For several days, Gob tried to get rid of it, but then he realized that his efforts were in vain. "I guess it's the Lonnie. Why didn't it occur to me to ask for a phone number or address?" The week turned out to be just awful beyond words. Gob couldn't handle it alone. Not only were the patients coming in droves, but they were trying to make his life miserable. Gob usually ignored the gossip, but even Nanny couldn't take it anymore. "You know, Gob, I'm amazed at your patience. If I were a man and heard only half the rumors that are flying around here, I'd punch him in the face." Gob looked at her absent-mindedly. "Nani, first of all, I don't give a damn about what he says. Those who know me won't believe a word he says. As for others, it's very foolish to believe rumors about a person when you don't know them. And secondly, sure, I could punch him in the face. But what would that change? Would the rumors stop? No, I find the whole thing kind of disgusting. And besides, what he says is none of my business. But I still had to talk to my former, or rather failed friend." Gob took the next shift. His strength was running low because half the department had fall colds, and he had to work day in and day out. Amanda, who was still hanging in there, joined him. He was very glad of that. The girl might have behaved differently, but lately they had almost come to an understanding. Apparently from fatigue there was no energy for unnecessary formalities. After evening rounds, he realized that no one had been admitted in the last 2 hours, and that meant that there was time to drink tea. He didn't feel like drinking tea alone, so he stopped by the nurse's station. "Amanda, are you busy?" The girl looked at him worriedly. "No, why? Did you bring someone?" "No, thank God. I wanted to invite you for a cup of tea while I have a moment to myself. I'm bored sitting alone." Amanda shook her head in frustration. "No, Gob, no way." He was very surprised at her reaction. Gob went in anyway. "Explain, please. Did I do something to offend you? Or are you still upset about the remark that was made in the room?" "No, what are you thinking? That remark was appropriate." The girl just rolled her eyes at him. "You see, we live in a small town. Everybody knows everything about everybody. And someday I'm gonna have to get married. And how can I do that if the whole town is talking about our affair? It's gotten to the point where people think I'm a terrible nurse. They're only keeping me here because I'm sleeping with you. And I'm sleeping with you because you're about to take over as superintendent." The girl's eyes filled with tears, and Gob asked confusedly, "I don't understand anything. What is this nonsense?" he asked, and immediately answered himself. "You're not telling me you even tried here, are you?" Amanda just nodded. "I tried to talk to him and he laughed in my face and told me to stay out of it," she said. Gob shook his head thoughtfully. "Yeah, looks like I'll have to talk to him too. Amanda, let's go and have some tea. You have nothing to be afraid of now." And the girl suddenly smiled. "Okay, I'll just get some cakes. My mother always gives me so many. I can't eat that much. They sat in the residence room until 3 o'clock in the morning when they were called to the waiting room. In the morning, when Gob finished his shift and left the hospital, he immediately noticed Michael. He was standing next to Nani, arguing passionately with her without letting her get a word in edgewise. Gob headed toward them. Nanny was the first to see him and breathed a sigh of relief. But Michael didn't look pleased. He was acting cocky. My God, how did this man, who is used to undermining everyone behind their backs, deign to pay attention to us? God frowned. He paused. Michael, don't you think you're overstepping some boundaries? It's one thing when your gossip concerns me, but why do you have to comment on other people here? What was Amanda complaining about? Nothing, she'll get over it. God, I realized there's simply no use explaining anything to this man. He swung around and punched him in the jaw. There were quite a few people in the hospital courtyard. Some were hurrying to their shifts, some had already finished their night shift. There was a car nearby, and Tim was reprimanding the driver for something. Everyone was silent for a moment, and in that silence the voice of the chief mechanic sounded clearly. Nice hit, but you could have given another one. Nanny smiled satisfied. Thank you, Gob. You've saved me from having to listen to some unpleasant speeches. Gob nodded and headed home. Now he had only one wild desire, to collapse and fall asleep. He didn't even listen to what Michael had shouted after him, what he threatened him with, or what he promised. None of it was interesting. Another week passed, and the employees, as Nani joked, finally began to return from sick leave. Fall adjustment was finally over. Now it was safe to breathe. It had already been announced that Job was the department chair and Nani was the chief medical officer. Michael's fate was known. Everyone thought that he would not stay in the hospital, especially with such a hairy arm. But before the meeting there was a rumor that his hairy arm was asked to leave his job. And now he was left without a patron. He remained in the hospital as an ordinary doctor. However, some evil or fair tongues claimed that this would not last long. Eric began to monitor the quality of treatment very carefully. He even went to the wards and talked to the patients himself. Before the end of the day, Nanny sighed. So, Gob, where are we taking the coworkers? At first, he didn't know what she was talking about. That's what I thought. You always think only about work. What about the rule that PROs get bumped to a new position? If anything, we're all waiting there already, the ones who aren't on shift. Gob slapped himself on the forehead. Oh yeah, I really deserve that. Do I get the day off tomorrow? Nani, do you have any thoughts? Yes, of course, I know a very good, and more importantly, inexpensive cafe on the waterfront. We'll be perfectly accommodated there. Gob nodded. Great, let's get going. Where else can we go? And there's something waiting for me at home. Gob saw Wanda as soon as he entered the cafe. She was sort of the receptionist here. And when she saw him, she was terribly embarrassed and started making excuses for some reason. Tell me, does she have enough for everything? Well, I moonlight on the side. To be honest, Gob was at a loss himself. He had envisioned their meeting so many times, but now he just didn't know what to say, so he simply said, I'm very pleased to meet you. The girl smiled. I was told you had some sort of event today. Congratulations on your promotion. Thank you, Wanda. I have to go to my coworkers. Can you promise we'll talk more? She nodded and looked at him from under her eyebrows. Gob headed toward the desk that had been calling for him for a long time. Nanny asked in surprise, Have you met Wanda? Yes, just a little. Do you know her too? Sure, she works at our post office. She's a nice girl. Though her fate is not an easy one. I think she lost her sister, her mother, and now her sister's daughter, but she is not bitter or desperate. She is always smiling and friendly. Nanny suddenly looked at him intently. Gob, aren't you married? He looked at his coworker in surprise. Why do you ask that? The woman smiled. No, I was just clarifying. Wanda left without saying goodbye. Gob was so engrossed in an argument about the new ultrasound machines that he didn't notice her stop coming into the office. When they were about to leave, Wanda was gone. To hide his upset, Gob quickly said goodbye to everyone and headed home. Fortunately, it was only a 5-minute walk from the waterfront to his house. Fatigue was making itself felt. In the evening, Gob fell asleep. He didn't even turn on the TV. To be honest, Wanda wasn't out of his mind. After cautiously finding out where Nanny lived, he decided to go to the post office. Well, if she won't give me her phone number, she won't. But I could at least try. Outside the post office, he saw Emma. "Hi, Emma." The girl smiled broadly. "Hello, doctor. What are you doing here?" "And you are?" "I'm the first to ask, but I'll tell you. I'm waiting for Aunt Wanda. We're going to the store to get a cake. It's Uncle Wanda's birthday today." Gob looked at the door of the post office. "Emma, will you give me a hand?" The girl's eyes widened because Gob was speaking in a whisper. "Sure. What do I need to do?" "I want to congratulate your aunt too, but in a way that's unexpected. Tell me your address. I'll buy flowers and come over. Just don't say anything to your aunt." Emma clapped her hands together. "Okay. That would be really great. We always celebrate all the holidays just the two of us." Emma not only gave him the address, but explained in detail how to find their house. "See you later," Emma said with a smile. Gob parked the car outside the flower store. "So, I have no idea what kind of flowers Wanda might like. Oh well, we'll make do with the classics." He entered the store and the clerk, a woman of about 35, gave him a lazy glance and then went back to her phone. The service was mediocre, to say the least. "I need roses." The woman stood up, still taking her time, walked over to the refrigerator and opened the door. "Which ones do you choose?" Gob looked into the refrigerator. Yeah, the selection isn't very good, but then he noticed several large, well-tended, white roses. "These you can have, but not those. They're for another store. They'll pick them up tonight, but I'll print them out for you. You can buy 3 roses." "What about the rest? We don't sell flowers that expensive." Gob smiled broadly. "I'll take all of them." The woman almost dropped the phone. She quickly gathered all the roses, arranged them neatly, wrapped them in a net, and said, "It's amazing that someone loves so much." Gob didn't bother to explain or discuss anything, just paid and left. The bouquet cost him a little less than a month's salary, but it didn't matter. Gob ate in the hospital canteen, and at home he survived on sandwiches, because he didn't like to cook, and the money was accumulating by itself, and where to put it. He hadn't figured it out yet, put the flowers in the car, and was about to get in. But then he noticed a grocery store. He could go for a walk. Wanda would probably be home by now. He bought some candy and picked up a bottle of expensive wine. After a little thought, he got some ice cream too. The door opened almost immediately. He saw Wanda's surprised eyes. "Hello, Wanda. I thought I'd stop by and wish you a happy birthday. Don't kick me out." She turned toward the apartment, then smiled. I guess it wouldn't be complete without her niece. "Come in." He stepped with some trepidation into the apartment, the very one she had been so reluctant to let him into. The apartment was ordinary, without much frills, rather too modest. Gob saw Emma, who was diligently slicing bread. She was so happy. "Hi, I thought you changed your mind." "How could I?" Wanda made a fist at Emma, and Gob handed her the bouquet, and Emma jumped up and down. "Finally, we're gonna have a real party." "Emma, behave yourself." The woman turned to Gob. "The bouquet was expensive. You shouldn't have spent so much money." Gob smiled. "I just didn't know what kind of flowers you liked, so I thought I'd impress you with the quantity." She laughed. "Did it work?" "Double. I really like white roses. Caroline likes simple flowers, but I only like roses. If you'll excuse me, I'll set the table." The next 2 hours were probably the easiest and most enjoyable of Gob's life over the past few years. They chatted about things, even argued, listened to Emma's stories about school, and shared their own. Then Emma began to yawn. Wanda stood up. "Emma, it's time for you to go to bed." Gob got up too. "I don't want to go." "Are you scared? Maybe it's time." "Gob, if you wait a little while, we can have tea on the porch. You can put the kettle on for now." For some reason, everything inside of him was singing. What could it be? Could it be that Wanda didn't want him to leave either? They sat in the kitchen for several more hours. Then he finally stood up regretfully. "You know, Wanda, I had a wonderful evening tonight. I haven't had one of those in my life in a long time." She smiled. "It was nice talking to you too." They reached the door. Gob turned around, saw her eyes, and couldn't help himself. He put his arms around her and kissed her. Wanda tried to pull away at first, but then boldly answered the kiss. "Wanda, maybe?" She shook her head desperately. "No, I can't, and I earnestly ask you not to come to our house again. In fact, let's not see each other. But why? What have I done wrong? Wanda looked up at him with eyes darkened with resentment. You took my sister and my mother away from me. You left and never came back. Before God could say anything, she literally shoved him out the door, which slammed shut immediately. Honestly, he didn't understand anything. He only realized one thing. Wanda blamed him for everything. Just like his fiance's mother had once done when she'd said that if he hadn't crossed her daughter, Caroline would still be alive, an assertion bordering on fantasy. But it was useless to convince the woman. And he didn't try. Let her blame him if it made her feel any better. But Wanda, she's a grown woman. How is that possible? Well, we'll talk about that later. But they didn't get to talk. He waited for Wanda several times at the post office, but she walked past him stone-faced and unresponsive. Gob became the most frequent visitor to the cafe where Wanda worked. But after a week, she disappeared. The waiter said she quit. He was ashamed. Because of him, she had lost the extra income they needed. Gob decided he wouldn't try to communicate with her again. It was one thing to decide with his head, but his heart was going crazy. She was singing and crying, but she certainly didn't want to live a quiet life like she used to. And then Gob decided that he would just bury himself in work, so that there were no thoughts that prevented him from living in peace. 2 weeks into the race, his mother called. Hello, son, how are you? You completely stopped calling. What's wrong? Nothing, Mom, I'm sorry. Too much work. I can hear it in your voice. Gob coughed deliberately. How could Mom always tell his mood from just 2 words? She should have been a psychologist, but she'd been a paramedic for so long. Gob, you know, your tricks don't work on me. Have you finally fallen in love? And Gob suddenly realized that he was, only she had rejected him. Mom, I can't hide anything from you. This place is so complicated. You're scaring me. How can love be so complicated? Oh, you fell in love with a married woman? Gob, you have to forget about her. No, Mom. What married woman? I met her here. I met her at the cemetery, Sister Caroline. Oh, Mom. And you didn't tell me she had a sister? I didn't even know. Not just a sister, but a mother and even a daughter. That's a good start. I realize it's her sister. But what's the matter? Why such a sad voice? Mom, you see, right after Caroline's funeral, her mother died. Her heart gave out. Wanda is Caroline's daughter's guardian, and she blames me for Caroline and her mother's death. But that's silly. I know, Mom, but Wanda won't listen to anything. There was silence on the other end of the wire. Then she asked him what he intended to do. I don't know yet, but I think nothing. His mother only sighed. They talked some more and said goodbye. Gob leaned back on his pillow, picked up the remote control. And again. Hello, my friend. He didn't realize he'd fallen asleep. He was awakened by a phone call. Hello, Gob. He recognized the voice of the doctor who worked in his department. Yes, I'm listening. Carlo, what's wrong? I'm so sorry, but we have a case. Well, we've got a girl in the pediatric ward who needs emergency surgery. She had a bad fall on her scooter. They kept her in the pediatric ward all night, but they haven't decided what to do with her. It's been too long. It's too late to send her anywhere. If anyone can help, it's you. You're crazy. How is that possible? Keeping a child with you for so long? I turn up the volume, and you tell me all about it while I get dressed. God was getting dressed while the doctor was telling him about the trauma. The girl is unconscious. Her vitals are deteriorating. Please hurry. Prep the OR, wake up everyone you can find. Okay. Cell phone rings. Carlo was still awake, and God could hear him giving orders to someone. Prep the OR, please calm down, doctor. He's gonna do better than that. They'll do everything possible and impossible. The first person he saw when he burst into the hospital was a crying Wanda. He rushed to her. Wanda, Wanda, is it Emma? She nodded and burst into tears. God turned to the nurse. Amanda quickly administered a sedative, and 2 more doctors were already changing behind me. Thank you, colleagues, for being able to make it. As they walked toward the operating room, Gob saw that the entire department was awake. Patients were standing in the corridor, everyone was looking at them, and some elderly woman even crossed herself and said, "Save the children." The operation lasted more than 4 hours. Everyone worked in silence, only occasionally talking about the work. When it became clear that things were not going well, Gob raised his hands for a moment of attention. I propose, He explained what he wanted to do. One of the surgeons shook his hand very risibly. Another objected, but she just doesn't stand a chance, time is running out. The others nodded. It's up to you, Gob. He knew what he was getting into. An old surgeon had taught him this technique and said, it works in 1 case out of 10. It should only be used when there are no other options. It's never been used on children. An hour later, they came out of the operating room. The doctors were talking loudly. Someone said, no, look at the dawn outside. All the patients have been walking the halls since the evening. Gob, what kind of a mess is your ward? Gob replied cheerfully, same as your ward. Oh, I forgot. We work in the same place. No one asked me anything. Everything was clear. The patients in the hospital smiled and went to their rooms. It had been a busy night. Everyone could see how fast the nurses were running and how many doctors were going into surgery. Job stopped at the nurse's station. Where's the girl's aunt? Oh, Gob, when you were there for a couple hours, she got hysterical. And then she just passed out. We bring her back to consciousness and she passes out again. So we gave her a heavy dose of sedatives. Now she's sleeping in Ward 3. There's no one there. Thank you. He went to Ward 3. He turned on the light, not bothering to turn on any extra bulbs because there was enough light from the window as it was. He took Wanda's hand in his and thought about why life was so strangely arranged, as if it was always throwing him back, but not to the same place, but as if on a neighboring spiral. Maybe it gives him a chance to right his wrongs. Wanda opened her eyes and tried to sit up abruptly, but Gob managed to hold her back. Don't make any sudden movements. You can't do that now. He gently helped her to sit up. Wanda immediately asked how she was feeling. Job smiled. It took some effort. Emma has a knack for falling. That's why the whole hospital was on its feet for several hours. But she's going to be okay. She may have to spend a couple months in the hospital, but I'm sure she'll be fine. Wanda looked at him for a long time. Thank you. Life is a strange thing. You've robbed me of 2 people I care about and saved one. Gob got up and walked over to the window. Wanda, can I ask you a question? Yes. What made you think I was responsible for Carolyn's death? Well, as a mother, I heard everything. You were on the beach. You didn't even try to save your fiancé. You just calmly watched. Gob closed his eyes. Count to 10. You're a grown, intelligent woman. Couldn't you just open the internet and read all about this tragedy? He went to the door and stopped. 3 or 4 days. Emma will be with us as soon as she can be transferred. The girl will be moved to the children's hospital. He left and closed the door behind him. Wanda silently reached for her phone to look up information on the internet. Several days passed after the scandal caused by Job. A check was sent to the children's hospital. Nanny sighed and said, we'll have to keep the little patient with us for now. Let her shake things up in there, and then we can transfer her. Okay, Nanny, I need to tell the girls to visit her more often. He walked out of the office and a nurse immediately approached him. Emma is awake and even talking. That's great news. He quickly made his way to the room, and the nurse, who was trying to tell him that the aunt was there because she wouldn't let her into their lives, waved her hand. He would see for himself. But how was Emma? The girl smiled weakly. I don't know yet. While Gob was going through all the vitals and tests. Well, I'll tell you, Emma's doing just fine. Soon you'll be running and scootering again. No, I don't want to ride a scooter anymore. But it's just for now. And then it'll all go away. You're feeling good now, eat and sleep a lot. You'll recover faster that way. He got up, and only then did he notice Wanda. Gob, wait a minute, the man froze. I need to talk to you. He looked at Emma, then nodded. Okay, let's go. They walked out into the hallway, then outside. I'm listening. Wanda hesitated for a long time. Then she said, forgive me, please. I didn't even think of doubting my mother's words. And then I didn't have time for it at all. Yes, your apology is accepted. Gob stood up. Wanda did the same. She looked him in the eye. You're not going to say anything else. You'll just walk away. He stood silent. Of course he wanted to say something. He wanted to shout. How stupid you are. Can't you see that I can't live without you? But something prevented him from doing so. Probably stupid, wounded pride. Tears flowed from Wanda's eyes. She stepped back. I'm sorry, Gob. I wanted to cry myself. If you'd been a little younger, I would have taken off my belt. How could you do that? A woman crying and he doesn't care. God flinched when he heard his father's voice, and then he saw him and his mother. "Where are you from?" "We're from over there. Let's introduce ourselves. I understand this is Wanda." Wanda wiped away her tears and looked at God's parents with equal surprise. "Yes, I'm Wanda." Elsa took Wanda's hand affectionately. "I'm the mom of that idiot who brought you to tears. Don't worry, we'll raise him." "Yes, father, of course. There's nothing to think about." "Well, hello, son. I forgot all about my parents. I've been buzzing my mom's ears. Our Gob's not feeling well. There's no one to support Gob. My parents were here for 2 weeks. Elsa was missing with Wanda at the hospital with Emma. Dad went to get Gob. Look, I'd always thought going to that cold hospital was your whim. Now I realize you found your place. Everyone here speaks so highly of you. I'm proud of you, son. You've accomplished what Mom and I could only dream of." Gob smiled. "Thank you, Dad." But John immediately turned serious and gloomy. "It's all for nothing. She's good for you. Not like your Caroline, though we don't speak ill of the dead." Gob sighed. "Caroline wasn't bad. It was just the way she acted. She came here to earn money for her mother's surgery." His father was quiet for a moment, then looked at him. "So what are you going to do? Your mom and I are leaving soon, and we don't know whether to get ready for the wedding and grandkids or nothing again." Gob looked cheerfully at his father. "Really, Dad? Why procrastinate?" The staff watched with interest as a whole procession entered Emma's room, led by Gob, followed by his mom and dad. The head of the department was holding flowers. Even the lazy ones knew the passion that had flared between him and the little patient's aunt. Tim, who had come into the ward for some reason, sighed and rubbed another one. Our doctor went to turn himself in. The wedding had to be postponed, however, as Emma wasn't there yet. But everyone agreed that Emma should be the bride's best friend. "Does that mean I'll have Emma's grandparents now? And not just grandparents, but real parents. But of course, don't forget about Mom." Emma squeezed his hand. "The best doctor in the world. It's good that I met you then." Wanda and Job exchanged glances. They smiled. "It turns out we owe our happiness to you."
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.